is there a possibility that this escapism is actually the result of living a bad life and ultimately being ashamed of this and essentially punishing yourself for this sin, you know, because you think that since you are living a bad life, you are not worthy of God's love? Just think about this. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, I'm gonna talk about attention and like the modern culture and modern culture of attention and modern attention to culture. No, probably not this one, okay? And this is yet one of these old men yelling at cloud type of videos, which I've done quite a lot of recently. So, obviously, attention is the main resource of the current economy. We have this so-called hustle economy, you know, when everyone is an influencer, everyone is like an advertisement platform, essentially. We have influencers, again, watch my video about professions that don't exist, content creators, etc., etc., etc. And all of this craves attention, because all of this is essentially a market enterprise, fundamentally, at least in this economic, you know, sort of realm, in economic projection thereof, okay? Which is, by the way, curious, because who have been using attention as their almost like their only currency throughout pretty much all of human history? It was women and children, right? Those people who could not, at least not to 100%, kind of tend to themselves. Like, women needed resources from men, and children needed resources from everyone, pretty much, women and men, right? So yeah, so this makes capitalism, like especially like modern day attention-driven capitalism, an absolute like female slash childish type of economy, if you wish, which is kind of curious. At least I think you'll agree. So the problem is, even though everything is driven by attention today, it's so shallow, again, it's so economically kind of sharpened, if you can even call it that, that in reality, if you look at it deeply, like, people have actually zero amount of attention nowadays, alright? They seem to be constantly busy, but they aren't really doing anything. Roughly speaking, they're scrolling the social media, right, the whole day. So we arrive at this situation where even adults say they have ADHD, even though adults can't really have ADHD, but that's a longer separate story, okay? It's this proverbial brain rot that people are subjected to right now, and it's kind of obvious. I mean, it's just an observational fact that this is happening. Again, what is the reason for this? Well, main reason, obviously, is the overconsumption of social media, I would assume, okay? So this constant superficial busyness, let's put it this way. And obviously, I mean, half of YouTube is videos about exactly that, which is ironic, given that YouTube is one of the biggest contributors to this brain rot in the first place. So this is very ironic, I do agree, but yeah. So, you may ask, well, why do people do this in the first place, and how can we rectify this? And I'll try to give you an answer at the very end. It's actually a very simple answer, okay? And many videos actually on YouTube, again, ironically, have given this advice previously. But let's talk about something else before this. Like, why are people doing this, okay? So, I would claim, and this is my sort of like a moralistic claim, if you wish, is that because they haven't suffered enough. You know, in philosophy of existentialism, which is almost like 100 years old at this point, right? There is this term, even though I hate it, by the way, I hate Heidegger specifically. Watch my video tier list of philosophers and you'll get the idea. So they still have like, regarding the point I'm discussing right now, they have a pretty good instrumentary. They have pretty good toolbox to describe this. So they said that humans are engaged in what they've called Dasein, or Heidegger specifically called Dasein. What is Dasein? Well, Da means kind of like right here, right? And Sein means to be. So like, it's being right here, being like casually being, you know, it's like scrolling the social media is Dasein, okay? Like, you're right here, you're reading this particular post, but you're not really here, if you know what I mean. You're not really here. You're just kind of here, casually here, you know, not really here. So yeah, so the thing is, you see, when you're not paying attention, like, and let's finish this small segment. So existentialists kind of focused on situations where life kind of almost, you know, how do you call it? Well, let's put it this way. You are unwillingly getting thrown out of this state. And mostly it happens to some sort of crisis, some sort of tragedy, like a death of your family member or something like this, where you get dragged almost, you know, by the hair out of this Dasein, right? Into the real world. So you start actually paying attention, returning to kind of our main topic over here. So this is kind of a good way to describe this if you want a traditional philosophical approach to this. So the thing is, when you're not paying attention, you're not really living. That's kind of what I wanted to say here. You can't appreciate anything in life without paying attention to it. And I think it's kind of obvious in itself, right? Like, thank God I've been breathing for 80 years. Said absolutely no one. You know why? Because breathing does not require attention. It just happens. It is Dasein, you know, it's just there. You just breathe and you don't even notice it. Just like when you're scrolling your social media and you don't even notice it. That's why you don't really enjoy it in the first place, right? But it's almost as essential to you as breathing at the same point, at the same time. Again, ironically, even though it's not needed in the first place. So yeah. So notice how you can actually enjoy breathing a lot more if you actually put effort in it, alright? And you can't actually put effort in it unless you start paying attention to it, right? So it's kind of curious that it can be much better, your breathing. I mean, if normally you have sort of like very shallow breathing, which we kind of all do actually, alright? So then you can do all kinds of like cool breathing exercises, which can be very beneficial to you, right? Because you finally start paying attention and you suddenly like uncover a whole like treasure trove of possibilities to experience pleasure, right? Like it's kind of insane actually that once you start paying attention, even the simplest things become infinitely more complex, infinitely more interesting, infinitely more pleasant, okay? And breathing is one of the best examples, probably. So yeah, or think about art, where it's literally all about attention, right? The artist kind of captures these minute details of life and leaves them, just kind of sprinkles them everywhere in their piece, right? For the audience to enjoy, essentially. And just like this, the world, you can perceive the world, for example, as Nietzsche kind of advised to, as a piece of art, essentially, as an aesthetic experience. He said that life is, first and foremost, an aesthetic phenomenon. Well, if you take it literally, it is what it is, because aesthetic means related to the senses, right? But you can't even feel the senses if you don't pay attention to them, right? Etc., etc., etc. We keep returning to the same issue. So any experience requires attention. Living itself requires attention. Otherwise, life just kind of passes by you, just like your newsfeed, you know. So yeah, you're not there. You're like here. You're in Dasein. You're just kind of like you're not even like documenting it, because like tomorrow you wouldn't remember the post. Like at least 99% of posts you've seen today. So were you even paying attention? You weren't, right? So yeah. Okay, so this was kind of a casual take on this. We can also take a religious take on this. Forgive me for this tautology. Like, there is a phrase, all you need is love, and whether it's Beatles or somebody else who coined it, it doesn't really matter. There's another phrase, God is love, alright? Notice this. And I'll remind you, we're in the religious take here, so bear with me. Notice that though, like if all you need is love and God is love, there can be no love without attention in the first place, alright? Like without attention, you're absolutely sort of like closed down. Again, you're just an observer of this newsfeed which is removed from you, alright? You're kind of closed from the world in the first place, right? So you're literally a zombie, kind of devoid of love and devoid of God, if we're talking about the world and not the newsfeed. All right, you are forever banished from heaven, essentially, if you think about this. And this may work both ways, by the way. This escapism that the social media overconsumption is caused by, for example, may be the result. Just think about this. Is there a possibility that this escapism is actually the result of living a bad life and ultimately being ashamed of this? And essentially punishing yourself for this sin, you know, because you think that since you are living a bad life, you are not worthy of God's love. Just think about this. Now, regardless, I just said all of this, regardless of whether God exists or not, okay? Like, this is not a question here. Like, it doesn't matter. What I've said is still true, okay? So, yeah, like, and you know it, you know that it is true, right? Even though rationally it makes no sense, like, it still makes a lot of sense. Yeah, right? Like, if you are embarrassed by this fact, like, again, I don't believe in God, except in the sense that I've elucidated in how to believe in God in 2024. See the link in the description. So if you're embarrassed by it just like I am, well, there you go. It's just, it is what it is. So I really think that the escapism may be this, you know, like this deep realization that I'm doing something very wrong, but you are so ashamed and you are so kind of like not having enough attention in the first place, right, to acknowledge this. So you're just closing down and like live life on like a slow burn, you know, like this sort of thing. And like, you don't think you deserve better life. So you just prefer this slow semi-suffering rather than having big suffering or big pleasure or like meaningful life in the first place. But we'll talk about meaning in some later video, not today. Today I'm talking about attention specifically. So the thing is that what I've called God's love is actually possible to reclaim. The attention, that is the thing you need. And how do you boost your attention? Well, the advice is very simple. You need to increase boredom, all right? Boredom, like there is like quasi saying, like boredom leads to sin, right? Well, supposedly, like bored people, they have nothing else to do other than to do something bad, right? Well, today, you know, if we have nothing else to do, we just embrace the Dasein, you know, embrace this self-defeating sinner mentality where I know I'm living a bad life, but I'm just gonna pretend that it's okay, you know, by scrolling, and not by paying any attention to life in the first place, right? And not acknowledging rather, that I'm living a bad life. So, in this case, boredom does not lead to sin, because you need boredom to start being concerned, which you legitimately have to, you know. So in our case, it's more like boredom leads to the realization of previous sin, to uncovering of the bad life that you've led, okay? And when I'm saying you, like, I sound like a preacher and I know it, but you gotta realize that everything I say, I can only say because I have experienced it, and not just in the past time, you know. I'm experiencing it right now. That's why I'm so concerned about this, to make a whole video about this, you know? So, kind of, I'm actually talking about myself. Like, you can think about it in this way. So you can just, again, look at me as a next post in your feed and then just kind of calm down and everything's fine and you can keep scrolling further, right? But still, boredom in our case is more like it leads to the realization of previous sins, of living a bad life, right? Like not paying attention, being a zombie. So boredom can lead to self-awareness. So basically just plugging out, you know, plugging out of the social media essentially and paying attention, right? So this is the prerequisite to any life worth living, because as we've shown above, there can be no life worth living. There can be no love or God or value, purpose, meaning, any of those things without attention. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing. If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.